You're watching the Daily Rundown. Secretary of State John Kerry was on Capitol Hill Thursday giving a closed-door briefing to the House Intelligence Committee on the two-year civil war in Syria. The briefing comes as some members of Congress have expressed deep concerns about President Obama's decision to give military aid to the rebels. One of those members is California Democrat Congressman Adam Schiff, who's joining us now. Nice to visit with you.
Good to be with you.
We know that you spoke yesterday with John Kerry. He spoke to you and to others yesterday. I want to get a better sense of what you can tell us about where the administration stands on this and what the timing is in terms of its efforts to give aid to the rebels.
Well, there's not that much I can share with you on that point, but I can tell you there's a broad concern, I think, within the Congress about getting military involved in Syria, providing lethal support. It's hard to see, without doing it in a massive way, that we can shape the outcome. And getting started in a smaller way will inevitably lead to further and further military involvement as more of our prestige is on the line, as it becomes more of a proxy fight with Russia and Iran. So after two wars, a lot of us are war-weary and not eager to see ourselves getting immersed in a sectarian civil war.
So acknowledging the reticence by you and others, what is the proper solution right now? Presumably a political resolution at some point, but don't you need to change the equation some way to even bring the Assad regime to a conference in Geneva or anywhere else? Isn't that necessary?
Well, it is going to be very difficult, but I would much rather see us focus on trying to meet the humanitarian needs in the region. There are tremendous numbers of refugees. We can do a lot more there. And to focus on the chemical weapons issue. This is where our paramount national security interest lies. It is where we drew the red line, and I'd rather keep a focus on that and working with the international community and with the rebels to disable the platforms they use to deliver chemical weapons and hold people responsible than get ourselves sucked into the civil war.
I want to ask you, if I can, quickly about the NSA, the surveillance issue that continues to pervade throughout Washington right now. You introduced a bill yesterday calling for some FISA court materials to be made public in an effort to create better transparency. Among other things, you want telecom companies to hold the phone records as opposed to the government. Intelligence officials have already insisted that this thing's working. They've already broken up about 50 plots worldwide, 10 of them here in the United States. If it ain't broke, why fix it?
Well, there are a couple programs that they're pointing to, and they may be commingling the results of the two. But I think the American people have a great unease with the idea of the government being in possession of so much data. And I think there's a better way, and the better way would be to have the telecommunications companies retain their own records, and when we need to query them, we query them.
Why didn't that exist? They said, we were told at least, that they couldn't keep records that go back that far as the government would desire it.
Well, I think some of them probably have the capacity to do it. It's not technologically all that difficult, and frankly, if that's the only issue and the government has the technology, we ought to share that technology with the communications companies, help them retain their own data for as long as we think it's necessary for our national security. But that, I think, would be much more protective of the privacy interests of the American people than requiring us to get all the data and query it, even if we only query it 300 times in a year.
As we head toward the weekend, a lot of people are still paying close attention to what just happened yesterday. The Farm Bill failed miserably in the House. A lot of people thought this is the type of stuff that usually is a beacon of bipartisanship, as some have described it. What does that tell us, Representative, about what we can expect to see when immigration really makes it to the House in earnest very soon?
Well, it tells us what we already knew, which is it's a very dysfunctional House with a very dysfunctional House leadership. As one of my colleagues put it, Speaker Boehner is not running the Republican conference. He's running one step ahead of the mob.
You voted against it.
I voted against it. I think it was a bad bill, and it was made worse when it got to the floor, and there were amendment after amendment, poison pill after poison pill. It already very substantially, much more than I wanted, cut food stamp benefits, but then they had yet another amendment to further cut those benefits, and that was too much for most Democrats to stomach.
So acknowledging the challenge over food stamps, which should be a far less dramatic and complex issue, how is anything, where do we find compromise as immigration becomes a central topic?
Well, the Senate has demonstrated that compromise is possible, and they're very likely now to get a substantial bipartisan vote on the immigration bill, hopefully.
Is 70 votes enough momentum to get an automatic green light, you think, in the House?
Well, not an automatic one, but it's been clear from the very beginning the only way immigration passes in the House if the Speaker violates the Hastert rule. If he takes it up and allows it to pass with a majority of Democratic votes and a minority of Republican ones. That dynamic hasn't changed. Now, the Speaker said he won't do that, but I think with a strong passage of a Senate bill and with enormous public pressure, including pressure from the mainstream GOP leaders outside the House, that he'll be forced to take up the bill, and I think that will be the best outcome.
All right, Congressman Schiff, thanks for your time. Appreciate you.